Hello, my name is James Bennett. This is my informative speech on culture. The topic I've chosen for my culture speech is American baseball. Uh, the symbol that I chose for my culture of baseball is the baseball itself. And the reason I chose the baseball is because, to me, it's the symbol of the sport. It's not only can you not play without it, but it's what people go to the game and try to get as a souvenir. You'll see kids running around the parking lot, knocking each other over, trying to get a ball, or even grown men, doing the same thing. Recently you see these clips on Sports Center all the time where a guy will have his kid, just kind of leaning over the fence. It's a popular thing to do to try to get a souvenir as a baseball. So I thought it would be appropriate to use as a symbol, and it's a little personally significant for me because it's the game ball from the last game that I ever pitched. So it's kind of the reason that I keep it around. Baseball shaped my life in many ways. I'll probably stay here all day if I tried to focus on all of them. But really, just to summarize, I played baseball from the time I was 5 years old until I was in college. And it's just been really a family affair, something that my twin sister, she's played softball, and my brother, who's 3 years older than me, has played baseball his whole life. So it's just always been a part of our family. We didn't have vacations as a family, really. We kind of spent most of our summers at tournaments, baseball tournaments, all-star tournaments. And I really wouldn't trade it for anything, not for any beach vacation or anything like that, because it was just a really good time to spend together as a family. We all enjoyed doing the same thing. We never really had family dinner. We did have, growing up, there were times where we did sit at the dinner table and have dinner together, but for the most part, we were usually on the go. We were somewhere, at someone's game, at a brother's game, sister's game, and it was just always more convenient to pick something up on the way home or something like that. Like I said, it's a family affair. It's something that we had so many games going on at the same time that it wasn't uncommon for one parent to be at one game, watching the game, and another parent to be at the other game, videotaping the game. So it was just it was a family affair. We had a Sunday tradition growing up. I guess it's kind of comparable to religion if you're a religious family, but something that we did every Sunday without fail, even if we didn't want to. We'd go to take about 2 or 3 hours of batting practice, and it was also a good time just to spend with my brother and my dad. Growing up, baseball shaped my life because it's my primary way of socializing. Sports, any kind of competition has been a good way for me to socialize with people. Most of my friends I can think now are friends that I made from some kind of sports team, baseball or basketball. Also, another funny thing about how baseball has affected my life is I rarely forget things now at the house. It's a common thing for a lot of people, even people that don't play baseball. You forget something at the house all the time. Well, playing baseball, I learned to do a visual check, from head to toe, cleats, socks, pants, because it was a very big thing. It was a very bad thing to forget any of your equipment, but also a very common thing. I remember my first JV game ever. I was pitching for the first time. I had a new coach, new teammates, and I really wanted to impress everybody, so I was really anxious and kind of just really focused on the game, I guess. And when I got to the game, we unloaded all the equipment, and I went to change my shoes, and I'd only brought one cleat with me. So I ended up having to pitch the game, and I remember this black pair of Jordans that I had at the time. It was embarrassing. I was sliding all over the mound, but I remember I never forget anything from now on. I always do a visual check before I leave the house. Baseball is known as America's pastime. You may have heard that phrase before. It's just, I think the fact that America's been so involved with the social issues going on in America, and also just, it's something that anybody could talk about, something that any American really knew something about at the time. When baseball was in its heyday, maybe the 1960s, everyone knew about Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle's, records. So it was just something that everybody could talk about, kind of like the weather. Also called America's pastime because it's how people literally pass the time, mainly kids, youth. I know when I grew up in the 90s, before, all this before the internet and technology got a lot bigger, but we would spend our time outside. We spent time with the neighborhood kids playing backyard baseball, summers, weekends, any time that we could before dark, basically. Also, I think a reason that it's so popular with America is because it is the embodiment of the American dream. You could grow up from any background and grow up to be famous and get paid a lot of money in baseball. So I think it's just one of those things where a lot of kids say, well, I want to grow up and be a baseball player. So It's just referred to as America's pastime for that reason. America's game, even by Walt Whitman. Another big thing about the culture of baseball is there's this feeling of nostalgia. There's always you're always looking back. You're always focused on the greats of the game that came before you, the records that they set, and that's why there's such a strong focus on statistics in baseball. Originally, it was derived post-Civil War in the 1870s from a game called Rounders from Europe. It was designed to be a little bit more based on strategy and statistics, more of a thinking man's game. You might say that that's the reason it's not as popular today, because if you watch a game, it has to be like a 4-hour game. It's a very strategy-based game, and not everyone can get into that kind of thing. There is a certain element, like I said, nostalgia, living in the past out of a sense of respect and awareness for the people who have played the game before you. And that can be observed in some of the cheating scandals you might have seen recently. It's been such a big deal. They've taken it before Congress to testify because it affects the integrity of the game, and it's something that's very important to the game's tradition and the integrity of the game and the people who have played before. You also see this in a hesitation to incorporate technology into the game, which I've always thought was kind of funny. You might have noticed earlier, I think football got instant replay a long time before baseball did, because there's less of that focus on tradition. In baseball, it's kind of the same thing with K-zone, which is this here. You see a little box over the strike zone. It's a little more advanced now, but a lot of people argue, why don't you just get rid of the umpires and use the K-zone to call balls and strikes? And there's a certain cultural element there where you want that kind of human error. You want that kind of objective sense, because there's a certain culture in baseball where, as a player, you have to get to know, you have to have a sense of rapport with your umpire behind the plate. Whereas, like a couple of nights ago with the Mets game, the Mets and the Dodgers, there were two really good pitchers on the mound. And the umpire was calling it both ways the same, but he was calling low strikes, maybe 6 inches below the strike zone, all night long. And that's just something that is a part of the game, and I think that people don't want to get rid of that kind of human error. Another thing that you'll see here to preserve the integrity of the game, certain ballparks, and also for traditional reasons, you'll see they'll have manually operated scoreboards. This is Fenway Park with the Boston Red Sox, and you'll also see a manual scoreboard at Wrigley Stadium for the Cubs. So like I said, baseball is really popular in America, I think, because of its involvement in social issues, and it's a very big element of social change. With the American dream, as I mentioned before, with Babe Ruth, he came from kind of a lower middle class income family, and he gave off that feeling that you could be anybody from any background and come up to be famous and rich, And a lot of people resented the fact that he could even dress nicer than the president at the time. So he was kind of a symbol, kind of an icon in a way to American kids, that they could grow up and be that one day. Also, like I said, it's an agent of social change. You might have seen it in the recent movie 42 about Jackie Robinson, and about his life and his impact on the game as the first African-American baseball player. There have been books written about it here for the Society of American Baseball Research to talk about how he impacted the game and America, and how they're both kind of intertwined and influencing one another. More recently with the Mets Kiss Cam, this was an interesting thing with the culture of social media and the recent gay rights movement. There's something that the Mets had a tradition of doing where they would show the kiss cam on certain couples, and then at the end they would put it on 2 guys or 2 girls. It's kind of a joke to say, make the crowd laugh, you guys aren't going to kiss each other because you're 2 guys or whatever. But that's something they recently stopped doing because it became a big issue on social media that they were kind of making fun of gay people. Another big aspect of where baseball and American society have intersected has been during wartime. It's always been a good game, for Americans to talk about in general, but during this time period, it was more of a distraction just from wartime, from the economy. In this movie here, if you've seen it, with Tom Hanks, called A League of Their Own, it's a very good movie, just kind of highlighting the importance of the Women's Baseball League during World War II. There were so many guys being drafted that there weren't enough to field a league, so they actually replaced it with the Women's League during that time. It's a very good movie. I recommend it if you haven't seen it. Take a look in the mirror. baseball and American society, like I said, they've always been closely related, but they also mirror one another in terms of the ethnic composition of America. It was big, like I said, during the civil rights movement. Jackie Robinson being the first African American baseball player. Um, Also, recently, there's a big issue, politically speaking, of immigration. This is something that I think could be addressed with baseball and the high level of Latino baseball players from the Dominican Republic and Cuba. Some of the baseball cultures and traditions that you'll see. First is the ceremonial first pitch. This is something that it started in 1910 with President William Taft. He threw out the first pitch. It's him here. He also is responsible or given credit for starting the seventh inning stretch, which is, now it's much more of an elaborate thing where they play "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" and things like that. But it originally started, they say, because he stood up in the seventh inning just to stretch his legs out, and out of respect, everyone in the crowd stood up as well. Food and beverages, it's kind of a touchy subject in baseball. I'm not sure why it's such a big thing, but you'll always see hot dogs served at a baseball game. It's just a traditional thing. And as far as the beverages, you'll see, of course, soda, but beer is the main beverage of baseball. A couple of days ago, I was watching Sports Center, and they were giving this guy a hard time because he was getting a refill on his glass of wine. And I never really thought about it that deep before, but it does make sense when you think about it, that baseball is kind of the middle class game. It's kind of the American game. So when you think about someone drinking wine at the game, it's almost in a way it's a symbol of an upper class. It's an upper class drink in a way, kind of more refined than beer. And so they made fun of him for about 5 minutes for that. So it is a big issue. It is noticed in baseball. Another thing here, starting lineup and the national anthem. Another reason why I specified American baseball, because this may be different in other countries, but I know that every American baseball game that you go to, you're probably going to see the national anthem played, and you'll see the team lined up on the first and third base lines. Here you just see a couple pictures. This is the tradition that was started for the first pitch, primarily for presidents, which has been going on for over 100 years now. Some celebrities and notable figures you might see throw out the first pitch. This is 50 Cent. If you haven't seen the video of him throwing out his first pitch, you should probably watch that. It's a good one. But these are just some of the traditions that you may see at a baseball game today. A little bit about the player-specific culture. There is a hierarchy in a game of baseball based on seniority. For instance, when I played college, if you're a freshman, you do carry all the equipment. You do all the field jobs that most of the upperclassmen don't want to do. So there's a certain aspect of paying your dues in the game. It is also a family. It's an in-group, not just on the field. Like I said, another example, in college, we went to the cafeteria together. We went to the store together. We went out to eat together. We did everything together. It's a very strong, tight-knit family, and we do like to give each other a hard time. You'll see this with home run celebrations. Sometimes it's customary that you'll meet them at home plate, or that you'll meet them in the dugout and celebrate their home run. But from time to time, you might act like nothing even happened and just ignore them when they come in the dugout, just to kind of give them a hard time. Another thing in sports, in general, really, but in baseball, is that you are required to have a certain level of sportsmanship. Treat the other team with a certain level of respect. But at the end of the day, winning is the most important. And you'll see this again is throughout sports in general, but people will push the line. Doctoring baseballs is a big one. Gaylord Perry here saying umpire looks like he's checking for some kind of probably Vaseline or something that gives you a little bit more movement on your pitches. Here looks like some pine tar, maybe some Vaseline. But it's one of those things, a lot like Deflategate, where people are generally aware that kind of thing is going on, that those kinds of lines are being pushed, but you are expected to keep it out of view of public. You will see umpires sometimes, if you see it on the uniform. I think CC Sabathia recently had some pine tar right here on his neck, and you could see it. So if they do see it, they will throw you out of the game for it. But there is this general atmosphere of competition where I won't say it's okay to cheat, but it is okay to kind of push the envelope, almost kind of if you're not cheating, you're not trying thing in baseball. But there are certain things that are more, that are more taboo than others, such as the steroids. There's no tolerance for that, obviously. But another thing about baseball is there's this culture of team over individual. You see this a lot in the post-game interviews. You probably see them, make fun of. They say a lot of the same cliches, a lot of the same almost scripted interviews after the game, and it is in a way. You're kind of expected to put the light, the credit on the team's back, not on your back. And any fault maybe on your back and not the team's back. So it's very team focused, very team centric. You're expected to be a team player and reflect that in your post-game interview. And also, as a group, baseball players are very superstitious. Some of them kind of make sense and are practical. Others are just kind of based. As long as the game has been around, these traditions have been around. So, a few of the superstitions that you might see. First, jumping the line here. It's just generally considered bad luck to step on the line. More of a tradition, but you generally return the ball to the mound after the third out. Unless you're in the major leagues, you might see him throw it into the stands as a souvenir. Another thing that you'll see is that baseball players are they're a slave to routine, really. I mean, we try to get the same routine before every game day. If you talk to a player, he'll normally be doing the same thing at each time at a certain time before the game. You have the same throwing partner, the same haircut, the same facial hair. You see that a lot in the postseason now. The same uniform, same meal before the game. Like I said, the uniform is kind of a big thing. It's kind of a mix between this kind of team mentality and also superstition, where you want to have everybody have their pant legs up or everyone have their pant legs down. I'm not sure why it's such a big deal, but it is a very common issue in baseball teams deciding whether or not to have your pant legs up or down. 2-2-2 count, that's a common superstitious count where you have 2 strikes, 2 balls, and 2 outs. And just, I guess, because of all the numbers being 2, each team has their own little thing they go through on that count. Perfect games and no hitters. You also want to avoid the pitcher during these situations in the dugout. You don't talk to the pitcher when he's throwing a perfect game or a no hitter. And you definitely don't mention the words perfect game or no hitter because it's generally considered bad luck and a jinx on the team, jinx on the pitcher if you do that. The last thing for superstitions, rally caps are a big thing in baseball. You get towards the end of the game and a team needs to put together a rally to get back in the game. You'll see them turn their hats inside out or upside down or some variation of that and try to sponsor good luck. So in general, baseball is just a culture of tradition. It's a culture very heavily focused on the past and respecting those that came before us. And it also is a very big agent of social change and also a mirror of American society. And I think that it will continue to be that way. Well, that's all I have for the culture of American baseball. I hope you enjoy.